Hey, this is Kim. I'm here at Mind Over Matter Meditation Center in Holliston, Mass. And this is your Friday forecast for Friday, February 25th, but it is Saturday, February 26th. So this is the Saturday edition of the Friday forecast. So yesterday here in the Northeast, we had some snow. It lasted pretty much all day, which makes things interesting, and you have to pivot. And sometimes things just happen where you end up doing things a little bit later than you anticipated. And you know what? That just happens sometimes, and we're okay with that. So here we are. It is Saturday, the 26th of February. I can't believe this month is already practically gone by. It'll be March next week and then spring before we know it. It seems like we're getting all of our winter weather here in February, which can be typical. This year it was particularly mild up until recently. So, it can always feel a little bit like a push-pull when you're ready for spring to come along and all of a sudden winter is sort of making its grand entrance and you just wanted to make the grand exit. So hopefully we'll start to see the strengthening sun and the warmth and the melting take place, and look forward to those buds start popping up. But I won't get too far ahead of myself because there's a part of me that really does love winter and knows that we really need this time for finishing up our internal housekeeping before we move into the strengthening sun and the action-oriented energy that's really going to be calling on us before we know it. So anyway, for where we are right now, so we are in the fourth quarter moon phase. So we are moving away from the full moon or waning into the new moon, which will take place next Wednesday, March 2nd. And so the full moon back on the 16th was about really sitting back and reflecting on the accomplishments coming from the seeds and intentions that began at the new moon 2 weeks before that. And so we are now coming full cycle. And so we move from those hopes and dreams and the potential of the new moon into the action and steps to be taken to reach our goals and accomplish our tasks, to then sit back in the full moon and revel in all the beautiful work that we have done. And it can also highlight things that didn't get done or didn't manifest. And so depending on where you are, you're either feeling really good about what had happened, or you may be feeling some self-criticism or some self-doubt or any other negative thoughts or feelings moving in and through you in relation to what may not have manifested in the way that you had hoped or wanted. And so regardless of whether you made the things that you wanted to make or were open to the things happening that you wanted to have happen or not, the next week between the full moon and the fourth quarter, which is where we are now, is about really sifting and sorting through what worked and what didn't, and figuring out what you're going to take forward into the next cycle and what you're going to leave behind. And so it's a really good time for breaking bad habits. It's also a really important time to be gentle with yourself. So that can be really hard when you are trying to let go of something that you know isn't serving you and be gentle with yourself at the same time. It's a little bit like patting your belly and rubbing your head, or however that sort of combination of movement that sort of makes you feel like you have to coordinate two things together that are seemingly opposite. So there's a lot of that. And that goes along too with the energy that we've been talking about with Mars and Venus sort of doing this oppositional polar push-pull between the feminine energy and the masculine energy. So we can be really nitpicking at each other. We can really be nitpicking at ourselves. Any criticism that we feel flowing out of us right now or to ourselves right now from ourselves is an opportunity to just pause and forgive yourself and forgive others, because pointing and blaming and all those negative feelings only attract more negative thoughts and negative feelings, and then we get further and further away from the hope and the promise that we felt at the new moon. And so we're sort of defeating the purpose of moving through the cycles when we are getting in the way. Now, we get in our own way all the time. So we always have an opportunity to distract ourselves from our path, and we always have an opportunity to get back on. It's a choice. Every moment is always a choice. And so right now, we're in a choice of how we're responding to that process of sifting and sorting. And so if you uncovered habits or truths that were maybe less than savory, or things that you had been really actively stuffing down for a really long time that have finally all kind of, come up at once, it's about soothing. And so the moon is now in a phase that it enters about 10 and a half days out from the full moon, and it's called the Balsamic Moon. And so the word balsamic comes from the word balsam, and balsam means anything that is soothing and healing. So this is the healing phase of the moon. This is the pulling back from the action phase of the moon. This is the sort of licking your wounds, if you will, if there were any that came up in these last few weeks of process. And there's been a lot of really heavy energy, and the process of moving from the full moon into the fourth quarter moon, when you're really nitpicking and sort of going through and fine-tuning, sifting and sorting, however it makes sense to you, that process can be very tiresome. It can cause feelings of fatigue. There's a lot of energy demanding our attention now, more so than ever, and that in and of itself can cause fatigue. And so really, what can you do for yourself right now in a non-destructive and self-loving way to soothe yourself? Maybe it is turning on music that's instrumental and beautiful. Maybe it's Beethoven, maybe it's Mozart, maybe it's painting or doing art, maybe it's spending time with your kids, maybe it's petting your dog or going for a walk, or a cup of tea under the right blanket, a book, your favorite book, anything that creates that inner peace, that inner calm, that sense of soothing. It's interesting. We have a hard time, I think, with self-soothing behavior because of the guilt we feel, knowing, especially now, that there's so much trauma and tragedy happening in the world. How can we possibly give ourselves permission to make ourselves feel better when we all know somebody right now that may not be feeling so great? And it starts at home, and home is here. Home is where your heart is. Home is wherever you are, and you have to start with you. If you can't put on your own oxygen mask first, right, just like in an airplane, it is harder to show up as a full benefit to others. If you're already depleted, you have to fill your cup first. The beautiful part about that, I love this analogy, and this is great too for the whole idea of relationships and the energy that we're in with the divine masculine and divine feminine. It doesn't matter which you represent in your relationship. As I've said, we all have this masculine and feminine energy. But when it comes to filling your cup and filling your cup first, healthy relationships are built when you have people who know how to fill their own cup and are so good at it that they have this beautiful abundance of what life is bringing to them overflowing in their cup. And then there's enough to share with another person or other people or their family or their community. And so if you think of the idea of abundance, which right now is such an interesting concept, especially where supply chains are being cut off and people are feeling like there's lack. And that it doesn't come without some intention for people right now. So you're in control of your emotions, and you're in control of how you respond to the things outside of you. And so if you can get past what you're seeing and go into what you sort of feel like even if you don't have evidence of it, there's something inside of us that inherently knows the truth a lot of times before we see it played out. And there's a lot of trust that's involved in that. So we're really being asked right now to trust ourselves and to trust the process and to trust each other, even when it seems difficult to do. And so relationships, good relationships, I believe, come from when you have two people who know how to fill their own cup, who then are able to share that overflow from each other. Because what happens then is if you have somebody who's really good at filling a cup and somebody who doesn't know how to fill their own cup, it can feel like your cup is being filled by being around this other person. But eventually you end up with an imbalance in that relationship. That's not sustainable energy. If we aren't one person who's always giving and one person who's always filling their cup off of somebody else, we have this unlimited supply from source, but if we're not each tapping into source individually and then sharing, there becomes emotions. You can get resentful, or it just an imbalance in the relationship that will eventually turn a very sweet seeming situation into one rather sour situation. And so the energy right now is ripe for these things. It's ripe for nitpicking and scorekeeping and masculine and feminine energy being at odds with each other. So the idea of soothing may seem intangible at the moment, but the best thing that you can do is find something that begins to give your nervous system a little bit of a break. I studied Kundalini yoga, and honestly, for me, that practice is so good for my nervous system. And one of the things that you can do without even engaging the physical body in the asana and the posture and the movement is, again, the breathing. The breathing is the quickest way to recalibrate yourself. And so that's really what this whole thing is about giving yourself permission to soothe yourself after the recalibration that takes place from the sifting and sorting that comes from the realization from the full moon of what's manifested and what hasn't, as a direct result of the intentions that were planted at the beginning of the month. So that's sort of like a backward look at the flow. And so now we're going to move through that flow again this way. So between now and next week, it is better to disengage from activities. It's better to complete tasks, finish that basket of laundry that you haven't finished folding and putting away, that pile of mail, any phone calls this week that you have been meaning to make. It's a great time to do it. If you get inspired to reach out to somebody, it may be just a conversation that you need. So allowing yourself to follow that flow and follow those impulses, I feel like is really important. And so it's interesting. I've really, like I said before, I love decks of cards, and I really have been enjoying this Moonology deck by Yasmin Boland. And so I drew a card for this reading, and it's interesting because I got the new Moon Eclipse. And so the keynote to that is expect powerful change. Now, we have a new moon coming next Wednesday. It's not an eclipse moon, but it's still a new moon. And I believe it holds a lot of value because it is the last new moon of this solar cycle before the sun enters Aries and we begin a whole new solar cycle. And so again, it's the beginning of the year, and we keep feeling this pull towards moving forward and new beginnings and things coming. But the energy celestially by the lunar cycle and the solar cycle is really more still about endings at the beginning of the year before we really feel that push into newness and new beginnings. And so, as I mentioned in the last video, on March 6th, Mars and Venus will have their last of these 3 conjunctions that have been taking place in Capricorn, and Pluto will be moving out of Capricorn and into Aquarius. And so from that point forward, between March 6th and then the sun coming in on March 20th, there's going to be a lot of that feeling of finally, yes, we're going to move forward, and the sun is getting stronger and the light is lasting longer during the day, at least in the northern hemisphere here where we are. So we're getting there. It is really about patience and breathing, again, coming back to that breath for recalibration. So there are 2 breathing techniques that I want to share. And I feel like they're just so, so invaluable. And so the moon energy, coming back to this too, the new moon energy, the new moon eclipse card. So the left side of the body is the yin side, the feminine side, the moon side. The right side of the body is the masculine, the yang energy, excuse me, that we have discussed before. And so alternate nostril breathing, breathing out of one side of your nose to breathing out of the other side of your nose, can be really powerful. And so what we're going to do for today, what I'm going to show you is just left nostril breathing. So if you take your thumb and you block your right nostril, what you're going to do is just take nice long deep breaths in through your left nostril and out through your left nostril. And so what you're doing is you're strengthening that emotional connection. And so as the moon is moving into new and it's moving away from the light of the moon, there can be a little bit of a disconnect, a little bit of a going deeper into your feeling, and maybe not having a great sense of emotional perspective. And so before taking action on anything, it's always really great to gain emotional perspective. And so we are moving into a time where emotional perspective is definitely going to be helpful. So blocking that right nostril, you can close your eyes if you'd like. If you do, I suggest sort of rolling your eyes up as they're closed and focusing on your third eye point on the inside of your forehead. And what that does is it helps to keep the mind from wandering. It sort of gives like a focal point to the eyes. You can even think as you're breathing in, inhale and exhale on the breath out. Again, just to give yourself a little bit of a mantra. But I bring that up in conjunction with this message from this new moon eclipse and powerful change. And so there's little descriptions for each thing inside of the book. And so what it says here is whether or not there's a new moon eclipse happening when you pull this card, it's a powerful affirmation of positive turnarounds. And so that goes in line with what we were talking about last week with the second chances, this opportunity for second chances and doing things differently and potentially doing them better in places where maybe the success that you wanted to have wasn't the success that you actually manifested. And so there are powerful changes coming in all this energy between this last lunar cycle that we're coming into and then the spring equinox and the beginning of a new solar cycle. So all the feels, basically what it comes down to right now is just all the feels. And so that's self-soothing. So back to the self-soothing and the breathing. If you don't know or can't think of what soothes you because you're in a heightened state, it's really hard. Sometimes people don't understand when you have tools, how you can still struggle. And it's because you have to be able to shift in order to use the tool. And so if you're in a state that you are unable to access the tools that generally help you when you're in any kind of emotional or heightened situation, the breathing can be a way to put you into a place where you can access the tools that then will create the soothing feeling that you're looking to have. Because the idea now is to clean the slate. Because when we come into the new moon next Wednesday, it's going to be that starting over, planting new seeds, setting new intentions during that first quarter. So you don't really want to be you wouldn't dig up your old seeds in your garden or the seeds that you planted last month and replant them. You would either tend to the soil or add more light. You may do something different. You may plant all new seeds all together. So it's really about choices, but we want to make sure that we're starting really connected to that emotional center, making sure that we are coming from a place where we are being gentle with ourselves and not critical. Breathing. That left nostril breathing, start at 3 minutes, work up to 4 minutes, work up to 5 minutes. Basically, what that's going to help you do too is it's going to help you to clear your mind and to help to clean the slate. So that's it for this week, this Saturday's edition of our Friday forecast. Enjoy the balsamic moon. I hope you've learned a few things. I know I've had a really long week, and I'm looking forward to starting over with a new cycle with the moon and planting new seeds again, especially as we're coming out from under the frost and can think about gardening outside. That's soothing to me, thinking about playing in the dirt, even getting my indoor plants sort of settled and repotted and digging around and feeling the sun on my face and knowing that soon enough I'll be outside. So whatever soothing is to you, find it, enjoy each other. I hope you've enjoyed this week and have gotten something from it. Feel free to leave comments, questions. I love to have conversations around where people are at, and enjoy the rest of the weekend. I love you all, and I will see you next Friday.